Okay, let's talk about the Clippers and especially Kawhi, who had himself his best game of the season last night against the Celtics. Looking like peak Kawhi pretty much. He had a turnaround jumper over Marcus Smart. He had like a deep two-pointer over Brogdon, another one over Blake. He had a pull-up three over Jalen. He had a tough corner three over Grant Williams. Just ridiculously tough shot making, right? Of course, he had that buzzer beater against the Hornets. And, they've run like some little corner actions for Kawhi with him getting a down screen from somebody. But besides that, like it is a lot of normal Kawhi stuff. So some ISOs, some pick and rolls, of course, doing his stuff in the post. He did have one play against the Celtics where he relocated off ball to the free throw line, and then that got him a little easy post up. And I do feel like Kawhi is the biggest X factor of the entire NBA because we all know what he can do. Remember that round one series against Dallas where the dude just decided, all right, I'm just going to have to make a bunch of ridiculously tough jump shots at the top of the key in order for us to win. I think that was like game 5 or whatever it was. But with all that said, and I guess this can lead into the rest of the Clippers team, it's going to be a process all season, man. I mean, for all the games like this one or the buzzer beater and good fourth quarter he had against the Hornets, there's going to be some games missed. Might be some games where he only plays 20-something minutes on some sort of a restriction. And this Clippers team is just going to be such an experiment with what is the limit that you can push the whole idea of resting and being ready for the playoffs, and just how much of the regular season can you put not in the back seat, but let's say the passenger seat for the sake of the end goal. Because, of course, you don't want to be stuck in the play-in tournament having to climb out of that, or having your toughest opponent potentially in round one and starting that series on the road. And, of course, last season their defense was so good that they could still be a decent team within this. And as for this year, they started out this season great defensively. They've been slipping a little bit. I don't know if I should be concerned. We'll talk about a couple of their recent games. But against the Celtics, they were great. They had Zubats out there to start games, start the half and all that. And he was defending Blake, which means he kind of wasn't defending Blake. It was like some deep drop, and there were times where he just straight up ignored him if Blake was on the wing or wherever. And it did make it a little tougher for the Celtics to score inside. There were a number of possessions where like Tatum had to take a floater with like 3 dudes on him, basically, with Zubats being one of them. Or I remember one where Jalen had to kick it out because the paint was just so packed in because they weren't guarding Blake. And real quick with Zubats, he's one of the best bargains in the NBA, man. I mean, they got him for pretty much nothing. They're paying him $10 million a season, and he's just fundamentally there on both sides of the floor. He also, of course, had that like 30 and 30 game 2 weeks ago, but most of the time he's just a reliable like 10 and 10 dude who just knows what to do on defense. The Clippers, they're not scared of putting a wing player on big guys. I mean, they had that a bit in like the Heat game they had recently where Bam was able to go at Batum a little bit in the post, but like they'll do that. Speaking of Batum, I gave him role player all-star last year, saying that he was one of the best help defenders in the league last season, pretty much ever since he showed up with the Clippers. He had a huge 3 in their win against the Wizards recently where they were doubling Kawhi late, and they're also fine with having their wing players serve as rim protectors and help, and I guess that can lead into more of their smaller lineup stuff, which, of course the idea there is it's a lot of switchability. But they've also got a real skill in swarming ball handlers and then still closing out to guys. Like there was one play in the Celtics game where Tatum drove and then Morris helped because it was PG who was defending Tatum initially. That's also my first mention of Paul George in this video. And then Reggie Jackson had to close out from his guy to Morris's guy who was now open. And, it's not like that's a foreign concept in the NBA, but it just seems like the Clippers are typically better at that than your average team. Or just like their timing on double teams, because sometimes they'll bring a whole lot of help and other times they'll just keep it chill. Like in the Heat game, they didn't bring doubles on Jimmy like every single possession, I guess, and Jimmy made a couple of tough turnarounds, and Bam also made a few of his pull-up jumpers that he'll take from below the free throw line but not right at the rim. Their recent win against the Wizards, they also had a lot of wings defending Porzingis. They also had Zubats on him sometimes, and Porzingis was able to take advantage of some of those size differences. And I think that'll be a common theme with this Clippers team, right? Where it's like, some games Zubats is going to play more than the small lineup. Sometimes it's going to be the other way around. And our big's going to be able to just score on them because they're going to have height advantages, but it's a matter of, with all the switchability and physicality and just smarts and speed that the Clippers have with their million wings, can that be enough to overcome size? But again, if they're having trouble, they can just put Zubats back in the game. The other thing with their defense for me is like, it's interesting to see when they decide to double star players and when they decide not to. because in the times that I've seen him do it, I think they're usually pretty good at it. Like they do a good job of zoning up around it to where they're not just giving up like an easy open three or a wide open cut to the basket most of the time. I do want to talk about John Wall for a bit. So he certainly still has the speed with the ball. There's already a whole bunch of plays this season of just he gets it in transition, and in 1 second it's a three-pointer for somebody who ran with him, or it's him at the basket. But that said, he also just hasn't played a lot of basketball the past couple years with the injuries and that weird year with the Rockets where it seemed like he was coming back and then it just didn't happen. I don't know what happened there. But yeah, I mean, the jump shot and the finishing is just not where you'd really want it to be right now. He has been, I will say, not afraid to shoot jump shots, which has been a common thing in his career. I mean, if teams went under screens on him, if they dropped on screens, he would go to the pull-up more than never if he didn't beat you to the spot and then get the line drive to the rim, right? And, it's been a mixed bag so far. He had a couple of tough threes against the Hornets, but there's also been some misses on pull-up twos and all that. The efficiency overall has not been great. I'm willing to give him a break there because of the amount of time he's missed. And again, the downhill juice that he provides for them, they still need that because for as great as PG and Kawhi are, they're more methodical guys who are not just going to go super speed in transition all the time, right? The other guy who gives him that is Norm Powell, who has been out recently, but, like his last game against the Blazers where he dropped 30, I think, he had some cool plays where, like, he'd screen for Reggie Jackson and then immediately attack off the catch. They've had Powell working off of screens this year, too. It's not just him being stationary with catch and shoots or catch and drives. Terrence Mann is a little bit more catch and shoot, catch and drive, although he did have one pick and roll possession in an overtime against the Magic, I believe, and then also he's had his pull-up jumper working a little bit, not every game, but there's been a couple of moments here and there. It's interesting. I also think if Luke Kennard just keeps on running hard in transition, he'll keep on getting kickouts from John Wall.